Unlike the previous presenter who changed his career from leaving Intel to be what I think is a dramatic performer and a DJ, I was a musician and I changed my career and went to Intel. And built a career as well, but I went the other way. And there's a reason, because I think I was comfortable with chaos and comfortable with transitions and comfortable with transformations. And I'd like to share with you today what that means to me, and hopefully it resonates with you as well, which is my wish. Business is transforming because people are transforming. And businesses are having real trouble figuring out what true north means. And I'm hoping that I can share with you some ideas, some thoughts that possibly could help us frame this new reality. As you can see, my fonts are really dramatic. I decided to draw it myself, so I hope that it's readable to you. But this is my image of what chaos means and what transitions and transformations mean. Nobody could have predicted that Egypt would happen the way it would. Nobody predicted that, above anything else, the mortgage crisis would happen in the country and then impact the world. Nobody had a chance to see these unknown unknowns come against us and how we could deal with it. Nobody could even predict that a single fruit seller in Tunisia who lights himself aflame is blogged all over the world and transforms a nation where the country just decides, okay, we'll just change in such a dramatic period of time. Most of all, nobody could have predicted that Snooki would have another TV show. I want you to embrace those ideas and be able to understand that we are living in a world of unpredictableness and that we need to cast some idea around it, a framework, some degree of putting our arms around this challenging problem and then being able to do the work that we have to do. The problem is that it used to be, in the older days, that 80% of the things that changed were cyclic in nature. So someone would always say to you, what goes up comes down. What comes down goes up. And you can almost count on cyclic nature of business to give you a pleasure and comfort. Well, that's shifted now. It looks like structural shifts have taken over. That's become 80% of the world. We are seeing structural shifts impact Japan, for example, and then Toyota, for example, and it goes on and on and on. But in all of that noise and all of that discomfort, is there a signal we can find ourselves in? Well, the signal to me is that we are human. To me, we are still human above anything else. And that business strategy, as you see great minds trying to formulate, have somewhat forgotten that they also need a human strategy. That business strategy and human strategy and our humanity is itself a strategy to build businesses upon. How can we see transformation with some anchors? How do we understand truth? Howard Schultz saw truth before others did, and he built a large coffee company. At the time when he saw people drinking coffee together in Europe, you and I would have just joined them and asked for wine instead of coffee. But he saw something beyond all the noise. He saw that people wanted to gather together to engage in dialogue. He saw connectedness, he saw community, and he brought and branded that into an environment. He saw truth beyond strategy, but truth in humanity, and made that a strategy, and built a business that we all enjoy. Most of us do, I'm assuming, and we go to the counter and bark like dogs all the time, asking for the drinks that we could not even understand multiple years ago. And we pay significant dollars for it. At the time when he formulated the strategy, all the trends showed that there were 3.1 cups of coffee drunk in America and that it was a saturated market. And yet he found an identity. So let me talk to you about a couple of these anchors that might help us frame business and strategy in an environment where the world is changing and humanity may be remaining the same, but is transforming and is impatient with how business is functioning. And business has to reflect that impatience in their strategy. One principle is that there are new principles. Let me engage you in some of those new principles. It used to be that strategy is supposed to be big and bold. Huge ideas, big and bold things in large documents, framed in large presentations with large font, expressed with large groups to manipulate and manage the environment. But yet, one small idea, as in the case of Mahatma Gandhi, satyagraha, truth force, and another small idea, non-violent, non-cooperation, reflected in ahimsa, transformed the world and then is reflected in Tunisia today. It is the same soul that is moving through the world through the years because of just those small ideas. So you can believe that I believe and you believe that one idea can affect all ideas. And if one person can affect one idea in himself or herself and then transport it to the world, then one person with one idea can transport beyond many ideas and affect many ideas. That means one person with one idea can change neighborhoods and the world with just one thought in action. That's just one of the principles I'd like you to think about. The other is one my mother taught me. At this age, I still call my mom, and I still tell her the world is out to get me. And when I do that, and I tell her I have the flu, and nobody listens to me at work, and somebody's out to get me because I had a flat tire, and so on, what happens is she says these words, and she said those words to me that defined my strategic pathway about building strategy. She said, you know, Mohan, it's really not about you. I didn't hang up, but I felt like it. But what it taught me is that business strategy is always about you. It's always about the company that drives the strategy. When business really becomes something beyond itself and thinks of humanity beyond itself, then it will become of the new principle. The third new principle is an interesting question I ask myself regularly. I hope it's interesting to you as well, which is why is it that when we talk about strategy, we always use words like destroy, conquer, attack. Have you noticed that? And when we talk about leadership, we always use the word mentor, coach, give attention to. So we're telling our people in an organization to mentor and coach each other while they destroy other people. It just doesn't work. We have lost our patience for that model. Those are just three of the new principles. The second is mission statements are really interesting. Most of you work in companies, I assume, and they all have mission statements. If I were to ask you to write them down now, you would leave the room because you can't remember them. The reason they are not remembered is because missions are given. Causes are taken. Causes reflect your own belief system. Missions reflect others imposing an idea upon you to act on a very narrow objective. Causes are inclusive. Missions are exclusive. Causes bring forth transformation in yourself first and then others. Missions bring forth transformation in others in the hopes of transforming yourself. So maybe it's time for causes and less missions in business. The third is that people with causes are transformative servant leaders. Mahatma Gandhi, again, is a good example of that. Martin Luther King is a reflection of his learnings as well. And you will see many who are great leaders who have transformed themselves. Mother Teresa, for example. But if I were to ask all of you a question, who do you admire most in life versus who's the greatest entrepreneur you know? If I would ask you who the greatest entrepreneur you admire most, you would say Steve Jobs. And the list goes on. Brad Anderson from Best Buy, and so on. If I were to say who do you admire most in life, you would say your mother, your God, your perception of who the great people are that influenced your life. So in some ways, we divide the people we admire away from the entrepreneurs we admire. And yet, Mother Teresa sure looks like an entrepreneur to me. She was fantastic in transforming an entire mindset. She used her brand. Look at that drawing I did with my finger on an iPad, by the way. But looking at that, you know it's Mother Teresa, I hope. How is that? She's got a logo. She's got an identity. The brand stands for something. It has power. It's transformative. It just doesn't generate economic enterprise value, but it does. It is actually worth a lot. It has enterprise value, and it is transformative. The same with Mahatma Gandhi. The poor man who was a lawyer, and we can forgive him for that. But he was a Cambridge lawyer who tried to be a good lawyer. He was in the United Kingdom trying to be a good Britisher, and that didn't work either. When he started to figure out his voice, it was when he discovered that when his voice is delivered in service of others, that his voice truly became large. If it was in self-service, he would lose the cases. In fact, he lost his first case and was laughed out of court because he was dumbfounded and not able to speak. That same person who tried to do violin lessons and even dance lessons became the greatest transformation engine and enterprise engine in the world. He also made people do things that they would never dream of doing, so he was definitely an entrepreneur. He didn't pay them, so he was purely an entrepreneur. They would die for what he stood for more than what he was. And yet we don't consider them entrepreneurs. The new business models are the ones where these entrepreneurs come from among us. There are some among you. I am speaking to you. I am begging you to transform business. Because business needs you. It is now time where transformative leaders like yourself first recognize the humility of the power that you need to serve the world with, and then turn it into something practical that can literally change the way in which the world views itself. The last order I'd ask you to consider is the order of the values we look at. Not really the values, but the value. The way we look at value is changing. When you drive a Prius now, there is a rational reason why you drive it. You're saving on gas. There is an emotional reason why you drive it, because you are making a declaration to the car and yourself that you are saving the earth. But there's one more value much higher than that. It's called symbolic. You see it at the back of every Prius. There's always some message that tells you something behind a Prius. They all have stickers on them. So it's a machine that's being driven, declaring to the world when you turn that engine on that you are a person that has transformed, that you are now energizing the world with your symbolism. If you don't believe me, why would this Tunisian man light himself on fire? What is the value of that that's rational, emotional? It was symbolic. It was a symbol that a person would send to the world. So in a sense, Starbucks. We go for coffee. We like the couches. It's like an extended living room. We sense our community, all rational and emotional. But there's another sense of value, isn't there? It's the symbolic. We walk in because we want to feel that energy of that room, that people are literally engaging with each other and you are declaring your participation in that relationship. And that's what's become of the world now. Business strategy now is starting to understand that the human condition is what they need to serve. And if you know how to do that, you can make money as well as transform the universe you live in. And that's the art form that I'm asking you to consider. Now, there's another thing that's very interesting. I've spent a lot of time sitting in Starbucks watching people coming in and out. But if you try to approach anyone who's trying to build that symbolic community and try to make friends with them, they don't want you to talk to them. It's a really odd thing, isn't it? They want to go there and sort of intravenously believe that they are part of a community, but they'd like to sit alone and actually have a coffee by themselves. That's this dichotomy that strategy needs to understand, that people are not really trying to engage in complete, unadulterated connection, but the timed connection with society. If you master the arts of all of these things, maybe we will start to really realize, not manipulate, realize the value we can offer in business. Not necessarily the manipulative style that we're seeing in business today, which has to and will inevitably change in this world because we have lost our patience. It is over. It is now time for another form. Value is being placed on a cup because you and I have put value in there. That cup represents community. So think of the power you have as an architect of value, an architect of the business strategies I just shared with you. Think of what you can do. Let me share with you one example. Root beer. There is a boy I know who's 10 years old. His name is Gage. He's dying of cancer and passed away just this year. But before he passed away a year ago, I asked him to join me for a bowling game. I ran to the floor and asked him one thing. I said, "What can I give you in this world that you want?" This little bald boy with beautiful eyes looked at me and said, "Root beer." I have now changed your sense of what a root beer is. From now on, you will never see a root beer the same way again, because it'll remind you of that boy who has now passed away. I did give him that root beer. He sent me a note of thank you and drew a picture of me with him drinking that root beer. And I don't see root beer the same way again, because value has been placed on an object, an inanimate object that now is transforming my world. Gage passed away of cancer at 10. You can feel my pain because I knew him only a short time, but he transformed the world. You know how he did it? In that time that I saw him the second time, I saw him in a store, and I leaned to the floor again and I asked him, "Do you remember me?" And he said, "Root beer." And so he put more meaning in that word and added more meaning to that value that I was always dreaming of. And then he said something very clear. "Do you know you have to keep giving gifts?" I thought that was just a side comment. He looked at me again and said, "Do you know you're supposed to give gifts? You have to keep giving gifts." Those were his last words to me. And that is the message to all of us, I think, because I'm here with permission from his family to tell you that. Tell you that Gage wants you to give gifts. And Gage also wants something else. Root beer. When I hugged his father at his funeral and memorial, his father leaned into my ear and said, "He's drinking a root beer in heaven." So I say to you, take my thoughts if you can, use them if you will, but please understand that business is transforming. It needs you to find your cause, find your identity, reflect it in value, and sell it to people for money because it's okay. But you're transforming the world with it, and please enjoy that. Namaste means I worship the light in you, I worship the root beer in you. Thank you.